Welcome, everybody. You're just coming in. Brenda from Philadelphia, one midterm rental. Welcome, Brenda. Everybody else, if you're just joining us, drop in the chat where you're from, how many properties you host. Really curious to meet everybody who's joining us today. This is the Northeast Region Host Meetup for our Game On series. So if you are a host in Philly, Boston area, New York, New Jersey, or anywhere in the Northeast, this event is for you. You're in the right spot. Oh goodness, hold on, that should not be playing. There we go. For those who are unfamiliar with Rent Responsibly, first off, hi, my name is Alexa. I am one of the co-founders. I will be your MC for today. Rent Responsibly is an education and community building platform for short-term rental operators anywhere and of all kinds. So if you are excited to learn, we have a bunch of resources for you that we'll be sharing today, and a ton more in other libraries that we will also be sharing throughout the event. For this particular event, we are talking all about getting ready for the World Cup. As everybody probably knows, this is a very unique and exciting hosting situation, especially if it's your first time hosting. So everything today is going to be really, really valuable and helpful. We hope. Let us know.
For that great presentation, which is in fact a great segue into the rules and regulations that apply to short-term rentals in these host cities. Greetings, everyone from Philadelphia, where it is indeed sunny today. My name is Tracy Robinson. I am a regional government and corporate affairs manager at Expedia Group. I cover the Northeast region, which includes 16 states in the Northeast and part of the Midwest. So we have 3 host cities in our region. Today, I will be talking about regulations that apply to short-term rentals, obviously, more specifically, some tips on how to find your applicable short-term rental regulations, what some of the local regulations in these host cities and beyond look like, and best practices and reminders for responsible hosting. Now, Merrick did cover some of that in her presentation, so I'm not sure how much we need to get into that here, but I do have a couple of remarks that I will share. So let's start off with knowing your local regulations. First, it's important to note that when we talk about local regulations, you should actually keep in mind the full universe of regulations that apply to your property. There may be state regulations that apply. There might also be county level regulations. And then, of course, you have your local regulations. So know the universe of applicable laws. Now, I will say for Massachusetts, for example, there is a state law on short-term rentals. It mainly covers tax, but you want to make sure that you are compliant with all aspects of the law. States are increasingly interested in regulating short-term rentals. There is pending state legislation in Pennsylvania. So by the time the World Cup games actually come around, who knows, the regulatory landscape might be a little bit different. There might be some more requirements that apply to the operation of short-term rentals in some of these markets. So again, make sure you know the full universe of your applicable regulations. How do you figure out what they are? How do you know what regulations apply? Well, the easiest way, and I guess now the old-fashioned way, feels weird saying that Google is now old-fashioned, but I guess it is. One of the quickest ways to figure out what applies is to do a Google search for your jurisdiction and then the term short-term rental laws or short-term rental regulations. I always recommend going straight to a government, to the regulator's website. So you can go to your state government website, your county government website, and your local government websites and do a search for laws that apply to short-term rentals. That should cover you pretty well. And then, of course, once you figure out which agency within a layer of government regulates short-term rentals, you can always reach out. There's usually a phone number or an email address for the regulatory agency. You can always reach out directly if you are uncertain about the laws that apply to short-term rentals in your jurisdiction. Next, you should expect some increased scrutiny of short-term rentals around major events. And with that scrutiny may come proposed changes to existing rules. It will be important for you to stay up to date on this, um, not just by being aware of what's going on in the news, but really getting involved with your regulators. So regulators may be paying more attention to any adverse events that take place in short-term rentals. So if there's a huge party that gets out of control that was not authorized at a particular short-term rental, there may be some more scrutiny at this time. Anytime we have major events like the NFL draft, Coachella, any sort of major event that draws a lot of visitors, there will be increased interest in short-term rentals. And then, of course, just statistically speaking, there may be a greater likelihood that something bad happens. So be prepared for negative press uh, to happen. It's unlikely that if something bad happens around the World Cup, the press will just not cover it. They probably will pick it up. It will get some coverage, and then it will draw some more regulatory scrutiny. And then that can also lead to an uptick in advocacy. So there may be some additional stakeholders coming out of the woodwork to advocate against short-term rentals or to advocate for stricter regulation or better enforcement of short-term rental regulations. Double check your compliance. So getting a little bit into best practices, we all want to be good actors. If you're on this call, that means you want to be a good actor, right? But still, you should double check your compliance, make sure you're doing everything to the letter of the law. And then in terms of best practices, if there are things that you can implement that you haven't done yet, for example, installing noise monitoring devices to get out in front of any potential nuisance issues, if there's any training that you think you should complete, such as how to recognize human signs of human trafficking, or just I would say now is the time in the ramp up to the World Cup to educate yourself on best practices, which obviously Rent Responsibly is an expert at, and they will be ready to provide full support to our partners in that regard. So you want to make sure that you're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's here, given this potential for increased scrutiny. You also will want to stay informed, not just in the run-up to the World Cup, but in general. As an industry, it's important for you to stay up to date on what's happening, not only so that you can make sure that you remain in compliance, but also so that you can have a voice in what happens. So as these regulatory discussions happen, as changes get proposed, it's important for you all as property owners, as short-term rental operators and managers, it's really important for you all to weigh in on regulations that will affect the short-term rental industry. And I know some of you have already heard me say this on other webinars and at other events, but your voice is the one that matters most when it comes to regulatory advocacy. So as a major platform, we can talk all day about how we think short-term rental regulations should or should not look, but we are still a big multinational corporation headquartered in Seattle, which is not in any of these World Cup host cities, and people generally don't really want to hear from us in these markets. So your voice really matters. I would say when you take a look at your government websites, a lot of times there is an option to sign up for a newsletter or you can subscribe to an RSS feed, or there's some sort of alert that you can sign up for. Maybe they send text messages out, but it's a great idea to figure out who your regulators are and whether there are automated lists that you can join so that you do stay up to date. If you wanted to get really into the weeds, you could figure out which committees in your legislative bodies are most likely to consider short-term rental regulations, and you can make sure that you bookmark the pages, the web pages for those committees or their calendars, and just periodically check those pages to see what's going on. And then, of course, you can also join short-term rental alliances, such as the Poconos Vacation Rental Alliance. I saw in the chat that we have at least one Poconos VRO member on the call today, but there are local and statewide short-term rental alliances that you can join that do a great job of keeping property owners informed of potential regulations coming down the pike. Next slide, we will get into some of the local regulatory highlights. I want to preface these slides by saying that the three host cities in the Northeast have some of the most stringent short-term rental regulatory schemes I have seen, and these schemes are rigorously enforced. So if you are out of compliance, even if it is simply by mistake and it is a venial error, enforcement can be very harsh. It's very strict. And that's unfortunate because there probably will not be enough hotel inventory close to the venues of these World Cup matches. So let's take a look at the next slide and we'll get into some of the more specific ones. And I also want to acknowledge that I know that some of these matches are not actually going to be held in a major city. People may have to travel outside of a major city to get there. And so we have tried to take a look at jurisdictions where we think travelers are likely to end up booking short-term rentals. So for the Boston area, regulations that are of interest include Boston's, the city of Foxborough, and the city of Cambridge. And I alluded to this earlier in my presentation, but the state of Massachusetts also has some tax requirements for short-term rental, so it's important to be aware of those. For the city of Boston, and just generally for all of these cities, registration is a requirement. So you will need to be registered or obtain a permit or a license in order to operate a short-term rental. In some of these jurisdictions, owner occupancy is required. So vacation rentals where the property owner is not on site at the time of rental are not permitted. Here for Boston, you can see residential units offered as short-term rentals are allowed only in owner-occupied condominiums and single-family, two-family, and three-family buildings. And then for two-family and three-family buildings, the owner-occupant must own all of the units. So we're looking at some pretty limiting regulations in the city of Boston. I have not seen any efforts in any of these three World Cup cities to relax the regulations temporarily to increase short-term rental inventory. Certainly, if we do see something like that come about, it's getting kind of late now, but if we do see something like that come about, we will notify partners. The city of Foxborough, of course, may be of interest, and short-term rentals are effectively banned in residential zones. Another city of interest may be Cambridge. It's easy to get to, beautiful city, lots of history, and very good access to Boston and to the stadium. These are limited to primary residences and a whole unit adjacent to the owner's primary residence. And then I won't belabor the point there about Massachusetts state law. We can go to the next slide. Okay, New York and New Jersey area. Before I forget, I want to mention that I saw in the news that the city of Hoboken is now thinking about regulating short-term rentals in the run-up to the World Cup, and Hoboken is a city that might attract travelers because it's easy to get to East Rutherford from Hoboken, and New York City's rules are so strict that people will have a really hard time being able to get a short-term rental in the city. So let's go to New York City now. As probably everyone on the call knows, even if you don't have a property in New York City has effectively banned whole home short-term rentals. So entire unit rentals for less than 30 days are prohibited across all boroughs. There are some minor exceptions that have to do with duplexes, but if you know New York City, you know that duplexes are a small minority of the housing stock, and they are mostly concentrated in the outer boroughs, so Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, and Staten Island. So travelers who plan to attend World Cup matches in East Rutherford, New Jersey, um, hopefully have made their plans because they may find it very difficult as the game dates approach, to find something that is conveniently located. And, we know a lot of travelers want to visit New York City. That will be very difficult for them. East Rutherford. Short-term rentals are prohibited in East Rutherford. And again, I have not heard any discussion of this city looking to relax their regulations at all for the World Cup. I know that in other regions, there are cities that have considered offering some sort of flexibility. I think maybe Kansas City is one of them. I've not heard any talk of that in New York, Philadelphia, or Boston. Jersey City, they enacted a short-term rental law a few years ago. Each short-term rental unit must have an active permit. Short-term rentals cannot be operated by tenants. And then there is also a provision in their law prohibiting short-term rentals in rent stabilized or rent controlled units. Um, I think short-term rentals will be allowed in Hoboken, but again, they are looking to regulate them, and I don't know what that will look like or what the timeline is for that potential regulation. We can advance to the next slide. Philadelphia. Um, Philadelphia, again, strict rules on short-term rentals. Registration is required. They must have a business tax account, a commercial activity license, a zoning permit, and a limited lodging operator or rental license. Those are the two categories of what we call short-term rentals in Philadelphia. And they are limited to a host's primary residence. So if I had two properties in Philadelphia and one was a primary residence, I couldn't just rent the other one out for these World Cup matches. So these, so there are some resources here for you on the screen, but again, I want to highlight the current landscape, which is that we have this major international event that is going to be played out in multiple cities across the US, and at least in my region, these cities are not really thinking about short-term rentals um, as part of the travel ecosystem and a way to expand their capacity to welcome travelers and increase the city's own revenue in advance of these games, which are historic, not just for travelers, but there are plenty of Americans who may, not just for international folks, but there are plenty of Americans who may have planned on traveling to attend these games. So this is unfortunate, and I don't know, perhaps maybe some of you can see some humor in it. But that is the current landscape. I couldn't, with the time allotted, I couldn't go into, okay, somebody's laughing. It's probably Alexa trying to make me feel better, but we didn't have time to go into the regulatory schemes of every single city or town that is adjacent to a stadium. But hopefully this gives you enough of an overview and um, enough of an idea of what you should be doing in the run-up to these events. If anyone has questions, I don't, well, actually, how am I doing on time, Alexa, before I offer to answer questions?
I would just let's skip any live Q&A just because I know that
Okay.
regulations can be quite the patchwork, as you've said. But if anybody does have questions, drop them in the chat and we can get them over to your team. Because I'm sure they would probably be very hyper local questions, if I had to guess.
Great, that makes
Yeah.
sense. And then obviously, if you have specific legal questions, you will want to contact the cognizant jurisdiction, and then you may need to consult an attorney. I have to say that we cannot offer legal advice. We can provide information on where the legislation is so you can read it for yourself. We cannot interpret it for you, but sure, that's how we'll handle the questions. Thank
Mhm.
you all for sitting through that. I know that regulatory information can sometimes be a bit heavy.
Thanks, Tracy. I was giggling there at the end when you were talking about how cities aren't quite always getting this right. It wasn't me who dropped that emoji though, so other people are giggling too. I think, especially for those of us who work in regulations all day, every day, like we do, it's like it shocked me to hear that Hoboken is just now considering regulations this close to the World Cup. You'd think they would have thought about this a little while back, but here we are. That's the nature of regulations and city governments. I'll double click or echo a couple things that Tracy said. Regulations are complex. Make sure you are looking at your specific area, your specific district in your city, your specific neighborhood in your HOA. All of those things. Don't hesitate to ask for help or call your city, call somebody, reach out to Expedia group, look through our resources, any of that. It is complex and very hyper local. It is, yes, an opportunity or a period of time where cities are going to be much more vigilant, and there is maybe a higher risk of triggering some regulations during or afterward. But I also want to point out it's an opportunity for us to show our cities how valuable and hospitable short-term rentals are to our communities. We have an amazing opportunity, which tees up my next segment, which is all about guest communication. So a lot of the things that Tracy talks about, we actually need guest help to follow the rules and to just understand why certain things are important. So here in 1 second, I am going to share my screen, and now I've lost you guys, but there we go. There's chat. Okay, so this segment is all about mastering friendly but firm guest communication. So there are certain things we need to communicate to our guests in a certain way, but we also don't want to end up being one of those hosts that ends up on social media like this terrible helicopter host. So we need to be friendly. We need to be setting really good expectations. We need to be creating a good guest experience. And this is all about how we balance that. So first things first, one of the things that Tracy mentioned and I touch on is that there is a lot more vigilance. Cities are going to be paying a lot more attention to short-term rentals and particularly nuisance issues, trash, parking, and noise are the big ones. And even if your city does not have specific short-term rental rules on these things, they still have nuisance ordinances. So check those things too. There are noise hours, there's parking rules, there's trash rules, all of those things. And especially when we have World Cup travelers coming, we know that a huge majority of them are bringing kids, and those who are traveling with groups, kids, friends, spouses, multi-generation groups, those groups prefer vacation rentals. So they're producing more trash, they're bringing more cars. They are just by nature going to create more noise. And that's not just a problem for regulatory purposes. That's just a completely avoidable headache that we don't want to have to deal with as hosts. And we don't want your guests to have to run into some of these headaches inadvertently. So this is where guest communications come in. When we talk about things like this, whether it's required by your local laws or not, we talk about helping guests manage their trash, manage their parking, manage the noise, and other nuisance issues. The response that we get almost every time is, how do I talk to guests without risking a potential booking? How do I answer tough questions without risking a potential booking? Or once a guest has booked or they're in my property, how do I issue reminders or talk about house rules without sounding like a nag or getting anything less than a 5-star review? I created the sprinkle method based on strategies around house rules and answering FAQs from my own experience as a property manager. I used to be a director of marketing at a couple of different property management companies in different markets. So these are things that I actually use on a very regular basis and really, really helped improve the outcomes and the guest experience across the board. So first things first, you want to keep things succinct, keep your messaging concise so that important information doesn't get buried. I'm sure we've all received a wall of text at some point, and how closely are you reading things like that nowadays? Probably not closely. So for example, if you've got a house rule about parking or the parking at your place is quite limited, specify very succinctly that your driveway or whatever it is can accommodate up to X number of vehicles. If you need more parking, public parking is conveniently located, insert location. something like that. Just keep the message about parking or anything else super short. You'll also see throughout this deck, I've got copy and paste. We will be sharing the deck later, and I've got several other resources that my teammate Lindsay will drop at the end of my segment for all sorts of templates and things that you can copy and paste. So don't worry about taking screenshots if you don't want to. I will have resources for you. The P in Sprinkle stands for professional. So keep your tone business casual and make sure your writing is polished. Even if you're just doing this as a hobby, even if you're just trying it out for this one time at the World Cup, being professional, being warm, but also being business casual will make you seem like a reputable host and will improve the guest experience. For example, somebody asked if they could book your home for a relative, friend, or anybody else. Always say, thank you for considering our property. For these reasons, we don't take third-party bookings, but we would be happy to host your friend, relative, whomever, if they book themselves. You can be firm and warm and professional and helpful all in one. The R stands for relatable. Find something to agree with your guests about or connect with them about. This is where this helps, especially when you have to say no to something. For example, if you've got a house rule that says no pets, make sure you don't sound like somebody who just hates pets. You can say something like, "We love pets. Unfortunately, due to severe allergies of family members, we are unable to host your furry family members." That tone might be a little kitschy for your brand, so modify that as you want. But make sure you can relate to guests on the things that are important to them. The I stands for instructive. If you need guests to do something or not do something specific or in a specific way, make sure your instructions on that are super, super clear. Consider having a friend reach through them and tell you whether or not they are clear. For example, if you've got a pool and you need people to keep glass away from it for safety, you can say, for everyone's safety, keep all glass away from the pool. Please use the pool safe drinkware and tableware in the pantry. You've told them what not to do, what to do, where to find the stuff that they need in 2 sentences. Well, this one's one of my favorites. The N stands for no but. This is a rule that we use or a practice that we use in our company with everything that we do. And that is to make a no clear and final, but offer an alternative. So, for example, if someone asks, "Can I host a party at your home?" It'd be great if they asked. They probably won't, but let's pretend they did. Say, "Hi, so and so, that sounds really fun. We don't host parties or group events at our property, period. That's the policy. But take a look at such and such event venue down the street, or take a look at some accommodation nearby that does allow parties. I think they could be a great fit for your needs." You're issuing a clear no, but you're still being helpful. The K stands for keep things easy, meaning don't make it hard for guests to follow house rules or procedures. For example, if you allow pets but you don't want them on furniture, provide dog beds for guests and their dogs to use. If you want guests to recycle, don't hide your recycling bin in the garage or out behind the house. Put it right next to the trash where people are already disposing of things. L, this is another one of my favorites because you can be like, don't blame me, that's not my rule. Leverage the law and other limitations. Deflect to rules that you didn't create. So again, we just talked about doing our homework on understanding the laws that apply to our house. If, for example, somebody asks, "Can extra people stay in your vacation rental?" They're okay with sleeping on the couch or the airbed. That's lovely for them. But you can say something like, "We would love to accommodate extra people, but local jurisdiction such and such limits this home's occupancy to 5, 10, whatever it is. The town, the city, the county will issue a fine for over occupancy. We recommend such nearby property to host additional guests." I hope by now you're starting to see some of these practices layer in and be able to be combined with each other. Finally, the E might be the most important one, and that is effective delivery. You don't want to blast your guests with all of these types of things before booking and in one big long message right before they get there. You need to sprinkle it when and where they're going to need that information most. So do they need to know about recycling when they are booking? No. Do they need to know about parking limitations when they're picking out their cars and booking their rental car reservations? Yes. So, for example, pre-booking, make sure you've got some of the important stuff specified in your listing, like no parties, maximum occupancy, maybe even include parking there just to give people a heads up. In your rental agreement, you definitely want to have things specified in there. And I would also recommend something like an additional World Cup agreement, just to like really reinforce it with your guests, what the rules are and why they matter. Pre-stay, this is when you should be giving them some of those helpful travel tips, like Mare recommended at the very beginning. Talk to them about your favorite restaurants and where transit is, but then also give them some helpful reminders about parking and noise and the things that we've been talking about. And then on site, provide helpful information in your on site signage and in your guest book. If you've got one or both, great. Because up until this point, you've only been talking to the guest who has booked the reservation. And now this is your opportunity to communicate with everybody in their group. So that part is really important for those messages. Here's a quick summary of that sprinkle method. Be succinct, be professional, but also relatable, be instructive, use the no but rule, keep things easy, leverage the law, and use effective delivery, and you will create a great experience, not just for you, your guests, your neighbors. It will be a great experience for everybody. Lindsay is going to drop some templates and things in the chat where you can go and get more about all this and copy a lot of messages. All of this is available for free in the RR network. It's where we've got all of our premium stuff. So join that, log in, check out the articles and guides library, and you'll find all that stuff there. And with that, I'm going to bring up some panelists to have an awesome conversation about other areas of risk and how to minimize that. Please join me in welcoming Ian Smith from Proper Insurance, Max Fountain from Avalara, and Humphrey Bowles from Truvi. Let me stop my screen here. How's everybody doing today?
Doing good. It's a
Good?
good day today.
Yes. Yes, it is. I could not agree more. Before we get into the meat of our chat, I'd love to throw it over to you guys for some quick introductions. Tell us who you are, what you do, and tell us a little bit about your companies. We'll go Max, Humphrey, and Ian.
Ooh, I get to start it off.
You do.
I'm Max Fountain. I am from Avalara, specifically, if I get the words out here, on the Avalara My Lodge tax product. We focus on short-term rentals, assisting when it comes to compliance. So stuff, the fun thing that everybody loves, lodging taxes, permitting, all that other kind of stuff, making sure that short-term rentals are compliant. That's kind of our name of the game. And I am based out of the Orlando, Florida area.
Thanks, Max. Humphrey?
So I'm Humphrey. I'm founder and CEO of Truvi, and we provide professional guest screening and risk management for short-term rental operators. And we do this across every channel. So it doesn't matter whether it's a direct booking or an Airbnb booking. And I think like there's two things which drive everything I do in this space. The first is I want every operator to be independent. So I talk quite a lot about digital sharecropping. And then the second is keeping vulnerable people safe. So unfortunately, short-term rentals are an under scrutinized vector for exploitation, especially sex trafficking. And I really believe that hosts, when they're properly informed and equipped, are one of the most powerful lines of defense that we have. That's me.
Thanks, Humphrey. Ian?
Yeah, my name is Ian Smith. I'm National Sales Manager of Proper Insurance. We created a product that it replaces your primary homeowner's insurance, fully encompassing, your standard domestic coverages, wind, hail, fire. But it's truly built for short-term vacation rentals. It's custom tailored. So we're insuring the home, we're insuring the contents inside the home. We issue commercial liability. We insure these as businesses. And we provide income protection in the matter of a loss during that period of restoration. You're losing bookings, you're canceling bookings, and so that lost revenue helps kick in to truly make you whole again. It's kind of the short version of it.
Thanks, Ian. Well, we're here today to talk about loss, and all the things that you guys have mentioned are kind of like a line of defense. And hopefully everybody here knows that short-term renting always carries some degree of risk. Everything does, right? But the World Cup and any big destination events like this are not normal hosting conditions. Especially for the World Cup, these are once in a lifetime trips for many people. They're high emotion, they're staying longer, they're spending more. So, from each of your perspectives, how does this change a host liability? Humphrey, we'll start with you on that one.
I mean, I think that's so interesting. I mean, look, liability is not something that you can move on to anyone else. And the most important thing that you need to think of is if something happens, what can I show to show that I've kind of gone through steps and taking actions against it. So it is not sexy, but I really suggest doing a risk assessment and then documenting it, and then, if possible, actually kind of showing to your guests that you have gone through that process. And even better, kind of ask them to accept what that kind of risk assessment is and say, yes, we agree with you. Because the best form of defense is offense. So the best thing that you can do is to look at your property, do a risk assessment, share it with your guests, get the guests to agree that your risk assessment is absolutely fantastic, and then go, we're now on the same page. But it is being proactive about it and it is documenting it, which is really, really important.
Yeah, I will echo that. I'm very much a keep your receipts type of person. You would not like seeing my inbox, but I will tell you, having records of everything has only helped me. It's never hurt me. Ian, how about you? How does the World Cup change liability from your perspective?
I mean, Humphrey pretty much nailed it. If you ever want a future in insurance, let me know. That was pretty good. It I would say it increases the likelihood of property and liability claims.
Hmm.
You're dealing with a real high energy event. You're going to have people that are going to be celebrating. You're going to have people that are going to be upset. Alcohol, late nights, just the probability of accidents, slip and falls, could be overcrowding issues inside your property. Could have issues involving, neighbor related incidents, that can come back on the host. And so you really want to make sure that your insurance policy is going to contractually respond to what you actually have at your property. The standard of care doesn't necessarily change, but the word scrutiny has been used a lot, but it really does. If there's any injury, an attorney is going to look closely at things like handrails, proper lighting. If I know my home, if I wake up at my home at 2 a.m. and I go use the restroom, I'm on autopilot, right? But I know where my bathroom is. But if I'm booking a home across the country and I'm getting up at 2 a.m., I'm not familiar with that property. So you want to make sure it is safe. Have proper lighting, explain things in your house rules, like Humphrey was saying. It's really important overall safety compliance. There's just a lot at stake.
Oh yeah. One of my favorite strategies is doing not just a walkthrough of a property, but a sleep through. Stay there like a guest would. Get up in the middle of the night to pee. Do you have night lights? Are your handrails properly anchored? All the things that, like, party issues aside, normal people might run into on a standard night in an unfamiliar place. So do a sleep.
Right.
That's a big takeaway there. Max, how about you?
Particularly for the tax side of things as well as permitting side of things, I will say nothing really changes with a big event, right? Because whether you like it or not, taxes, whether you're renting during a big event or you're renting any other time of the year, is important and it's required to be filed. And lodging taxes are essentially the tax that your guest pays when they booked the property, and it's passed over to you in some cases, and it's your responsibility as the host to then pay them to the state and to the county, city, whatever is applicable. So regardless, you're taking in this tax in some cases, and it's your responsibility to file them, even if it's during a big event. But the big thing to kind of call out is during events like this or any other that happens throughout the year, in case you're ever deciding to rent outside of the World Cup, and we hope you do, Um, if you do, bigger events cause bigger scrutiny, whether you like it or not. And there's more and more jurisdictions that are utilizing stuff like AI in order to scrape listings from VRBO and Airbnb in order to find people that aren't filing taxes or aren't permitted. And they're going to be looking even harder, whether you like it or not, to find people that aren't giving them their tax money. I always say Uncle Sam's happy as long as Uncle Sam gets his money.
Mhm. Yeah, and that goes back to keeping all your records, doing your audits, because yeah, when cities are using software in those instances, they're not getting it right themselves either. So you might have to prove that, yes, I've actually done these things correctly. I've checked all these boxes. We've talked a lot about kind of, I guess, the scarier stuff here. And like these areas are not just preventing headaches, preventing major issues. A lot of hosts, especially first timers, worry that a lot of the things that they need to be doing are going to be really complicated or they're going to put guests off. I mean, it's part of the reason why I created the sprinkle method because you can turn these types of things into opportunities. But let's talk about the guests. I think this is one thing that we don't talk about enough. So pretend I'm one of those potential guests who is booking a property for a group of people and I have a lot of pressure and we don't even have to really pretend because I am usually actually this person when I book vacations. What would you tell me as the guest about why it's important to stay with a host or a manager who cares about these things and is doing them correctly? Max, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so great question. The biggest thing that I always kind of toss out whenever this question comes up is I will not even just reference myself and Avalara, right, as people who do this, but Focusrite, which is a industry analytics company, in a 2024 short-term rental survey, 92% of short-term rental guests stated that it was important that any short-term rental property that they stayed at or considered was compliant with local laws and registrations. So even just the guests themselves are saying that it's extremely important for them to be staying inside of any of these properties. And that will set you apart from all of the other, from a host perspective, properties that aren't doing things correctly. And the big thing I kind of toss out as a piece of that too is as a guest, right? I would want to make sure that I'm not overpaying in terms of tax rate. So always just ensuring that you have the correct tax rate plugged into your listing is super important too. As well, from a host perspective, this could mean the difference between you getting a booking and not getting a booking because someone within, a block or two from within your property that's somewhat of a comparable property could be charging $100 less because their tax rate is actually accurate versus yours. So having everything buttoned up is super good, but also making sure that you have all the compliance boxes checked, similar to like what Alexa had said, because the guest cares about this maybe sometimes more than the jurisdictions do.
Yeah, that 92% stat just blows me away. But it makes sense because if I'm looking at properties and I see, for example, a bunch of them have the permit number like they're supposed to, and one doesn't, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't stay there if they're not above board. And if all the other ones do have their permit number, it gives me more confidence to know that things inside the property are probably also going to be cared for as they should be as well. Humphrey, what about you?
Well, I mean, I'd just love to have a moment with you. What I would say if you were my guest is, we ask every guest, Alexa, to verify their identity before arrival. It's got nothing to do with you particularly, and it's not because we're suspicious of you, but it's because we take our responsibility seriously. And we're inviting a stranger into a home that we're accountable for.
Mhm.
And screening is how we make sure that's a safe decision for everyone, our neighbors, you. And, if you were coming after us, you'd want to make sure the house was left beautiful for you. This is how we do it. And the guests who stay here know the property is protected. That's part of what you're paying for. So it's very human, it's very leveling, it's explaining, it's being transparent, and it's getting them to buy in on the basis that they're great and there shouldn't be a problem. And obviously, if anyone does put up, reasons and objections, it should be a flag.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. I, of course, am a responsible guest, and I find it weird now to book a property and they don't verify my ID. So I think, especially if we're in a multifamily situation, I start to wonder, okay, has anybody vetted people on the property next to me? I travel alone a lot as a female. That is a scary situation to be in. So things like this give me confidence for sure. And yeah, it makes me so much more likely to book with companies like that again in the future. Ian, what about you?
I mean, I would I would want you to have the confidence in me, in who you're booking with.
Mhm.
From an insurance perspective, I'm responsible for my home, the asset itself. I'm responsible for the liability that takes place on the property. So if you, like, heaven forbid, if you sustained an injury on my property and those medical payments, the bodily injury, were astronomically high, and you were forced to hire counsel and come after me. Like, me having the right insurance is my responsibility to make sure that you're actually going to be taken care of in that situation. Now, it's important to obviously never assume liability and things like that, but if you have the right insurance, it's going to respond to bodily injury, and property damage, that if I'm at fault. Negligence can't be waived. So having a great rental agreement, in place, it's just for transparency. And I want you to have that expectation that there's no surprises for you. There's no surprises for me. And in your perspective, it all adds up to a peace of mind. So you're choosing a host who's professional. I'm prepared, and I'm focused on delivering, a safe experience for you. And you're just not a booking on my calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm lucky in that we've gotten to work with proper insurance for a very long time now. So I know some of the ins and outs of what you look for in properties to decide whether you can cover them or not. And I know proper insurance is extremely thorough. One of the most important areas is safety for kids. And we know for the World Cup in particular, 74%, whatever that stat was, are bringing kids. So knowing this, what are some of the blind spots that hosts should be aware of and be on the lookout for? And Ian, let's stay with you on that question since we were talking insurance.
Um, if you're offering any baby or toddler gear, your cribs, your pack and plays, high chairs, get with the manufacturers. Make sure you're on the list to receive any recalls. It's huge. Inspect after each stay. Include it just in your post-stay inspection. Make sure if you have a high chair, everything's just in order and it's safe for the next person to use. Bunk beds are another big one. The top bunk, you want 5 inches above the mattress. You need to have that safety rail going across the top. We underwrite online listings. We've seen ceiling fans that span over the top bunks. Somebody's in there and they get up and you turn that ceiling fan on, they're gonna get smacked. That's a pretty big one. The pool safety, if you have pools, you want depth markers. You have to have a life-saving device, whether it's a throw ring or a shepherd's pole, and have a swim at your own risk sign. Depth markers are absolutely huge. You need to have depth markers, especially if you have people drinking and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they're going to go jump in the pool. There's zero defensibility without having safety equipment available when you're offering these amenities.
Mm, such a great point. I think the recall on the baby equipment thing is such a I think that's one of the biggest blind spots. I know lots of cities have rules and regulations around pool safety, so that's becoming more and more prevalent, and people are aware of it. But the recall thing is just so scary. My teammate Lindsay's going to drop in the chat a company called Baby Quip. They do baby gear rentals and they keep an eye on that stuff. There's also all sorts of other gear rental companies that cover this for you. So if you want to offer stuff like that, consider outsourcing it to a company that keeps track of those things very, very closely. Humphrey, let me throw that question to you. What are some blind spots from your perspective when it comes to kids and younger travelers?
I mean, look, when hopefully you got the bookings flying in and you're filling your calendar up pretty fast, um, it's a high volume period, isn't it? And that is when you get some pressure, and that's when standards start to slip. And it's also when bad actors know that standards are going to slip. So, look, this is an uncomfortable one, and I'm really sorry for making people feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's way better you hear it from me than someone else comes and stays in your property. But during major sporting events, it's fairly well known that the exploitation of minors is a documented and significant risk. So please, like, watch out for patterns which don't quite look normal. People traveling with volumes of children. Um, a child traveling with an adult doesn't mean that that adult is their parent or guardian. And I really believe that as hosts, we are able to identify these things. And if your gut tells you something's not quite right, then please act on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a very heavy topic to discuss, but it's one that our entire industry just has to be aware of and trained on. For those who are not at our kickoff event as a part of this series, please go watch the replay because Humphrey and Max and Ian's teammate Nick all did much more detailed presentations on these things with very specific action items and takeaways and things. So I highly recommend really learning a lot more. Everything we're covering today is really scratching the surface on things that you can go really, really deep on. Let's wrap up the blind spot question with Max. What are some tax related blind spots?
I always call out the very first thing that a lot of people always assume is my marketplace, aka Airbnb or VRBO, is filing everything for me, so I don't have to do anything. And sometimes that's the case, and sometimes it's not. I know, particularly inside of New York City, that is not the case. Obviously, I know the Expedia group kind of talked a little bit earlier about how it's almost near impossible to be renting within New York unless you got like a duplex or anything along those lines. But if you do plan on it, none of the city taxes are being filed for you, and it's your responsibility to file those either on a monthly or quarterly basis. So it's something that a lot of people don't expect and a lot of people miss. Something as well, I kind of tossed out before, obviously, making sure that you have your tax rate right. A lot of people assume that their tax rate is correct or whatever Airbnb or VRBO put onto their listing is automatically correct. Still double check those. You never want to be undercharging or overcharging guests. If you're undercharging it, you got a tax bill coming later on. Same thing with overcharging. You never want to be overcharging because you're pocketing that money. Other big thing that I actually had thought about a little bit more is something called the Masters Rule. And some people might know about the Masters that occurred last year. And a lot of people think this Masters Rule is essentially an IRS rule to where if you are renting less than 14 days, you aren't required to file that as a piece of your income. Well, a lot of people immediately assume that that also applies to the lodging taxes, and it does not. If you are still renting less than 14 days out of the entire year, lodging taxes is not a tax that's ever exempt. It is only ever exempt if you have a 501c3 nonprofit or a tax exempt entity staying inside of your home. So if you are collecting these taxes and they are being passed over to you, it's your responsibility to remit them, regardless of however long you are renting them for, as long as it is considered a short-term rental and not a long-term. But I definitely recommend, like Alexa mentioned, listening to the replay that we had done before as we go kind of a little bit further in depth onto what is considered a long-term and what is short-term.
Yeah. And I'll echo that. I mean, I've seen places where the platforms do collect and send in the tax for hosts, but hosts still have to submit a report to whatever jurisdiction for $0. And people don't know that, and they get fined for that, even though they have technically submitted all the right taxes. There's other places that have, some strange or weird like county level tax that is not collected on the platform, but the rest are just, well, there's no shortage of fun stuff with the taxes, right, Max?
Absolutely.
All right, let's wrap up here with a rapid fire. I always like to end on these, and I always like to end on superlatives. So when you guys are talking to hosts, what is your go-to resource to recommend to them, especially if they're their first time host period, or it's their first time hosting around a big event like this? Ian, let me throw that to you first.
I'm a huge advocate for Justin Ford over at Breezeway. If you want to change your perspective and fully understand, how to build a safe environment for your guests, just Google Breezeway STR safety course. Very knowledgeable. He has tons of experience in this industry and he knows what he's doing. I'm a proud sponsor of Humphrey over here. What he's doing is extremely proactive, and that's just something that we should all be doing as people.
Mhm. Totally agree. Max, how about you?
I'm a little biased, but I would say Avalara, and it's not just because of me wearing the orange, the obnoxious orange right now, but it's because we do have a lot of free resources available on our website. We have state lodging tax guides that kind of walk you through completely for free the lodging tax requirements within that specific state. We have the free tax rate lookup tool, as well as I always tell people we're always available to kind of walk you through what requirements might be applicable for your property, or even if or what your marketplace is filing. Me and the five people on our team, we don't bite, only occasionally, if you make us mad. So otherwise, give us a call. We're always happy to help. Reach out to us. Happy to make anything a little bit clearer in tax because it is as clear as mud.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I have used your tax lookup tools almost exclusively for the last 10 years. I mean, you guys have the best tax resource. Yeah, definitely talk to the Avalara team, look at those resources. Same thing for Truvi and Proper. I'm just gonna plug you guys. Proper has a free consult. The Truvi team is all wonderful. They've got a ton of resources too. So on that note, Humphrey, what's your favorite resource?
Well, now you're gonna make me feel like I'm just complimenting you guys back again. Look, it has to be the Rent Responsibly network. Like, guys, they exist specifically to help hosts operate professionally and responsibly, which is exactly what a first-time host needs before the crowds arrive. So everyone here has done the right thing by showing up, but I bet there are hundreds, thousands of people probably who haven't. So please spread the word, get them to engage. The more people that engage, the better it is for everybody.
Thanks, Humphrey. I appreciate that. Yes, we have a ton of resources. We have all these wonderful partners here for a reason. These are companies that we love and recommend, and a lot of us use ourselves. So please check them out. Please check out their resources. They are just wells of information that you will just be so happy that you are now in touch with. So Ian, Humphrey, Max, thank you guys so much for joining us. Everybody, please again, watch the replay of their earlier sessions. With that, let's get out of risk. Let's get out of taxes. Let's get out of some of the scarier stuff. Let's eat your vegetable stuff and go over to the fun stuff, which is Blythe Butcher. She's going to talk to us about how to bring guests back after the final whistle. Take it away, Blythe.
Thanks, Alexa. Hi, everybody. As Alexa said, my name is Blythe Butcher. I am Rent Responsibly's Director of Marketing. We've spent about the last hour talking about the how, so the trends, the regulations, and the logistics of hosting during the 2026 World Cup. But as we wrap up, I want to talk about July 20th, 2026, the day after the final whistle blows. For new hosts, you've just completed your first major event, and for our experienced operators, you've just managed your busiest month ever. So the question is, was this a one-time transaction or was this the start of a 10-year business relationship? Today, we're going to ensure it's the latter by mastering guest retention. Our goal here is to transform every World Cup traveler into a fan and ultimately into a lifetime customer. Let me show you the four-stage journey we're targeting. So we're going to think of this as a funnel. At step one, we have that one-time visitor. These are your World Cup travelers, and they're costing you between 15 and 25% to acquire. At step two, this is the perfect first stay. So this is your foundation. If you fail here, nothing else is going to matter. At step 3, we have our return visitor. So this is the engaged fan who's booking direct. There's an 80% retention potential at this step. At this step, the economics really start to work in your favor. At step 4, you have your brand advocate. So there's $0 to acquire. They are booking repeat stays and they're bringing you referrals. At the bottom, I have this call out. This is your biggest opportunity, that stage to 2 to 3 conversion. Most hosts are doing great getting those 5-star reviews, but are failing at turning the satisfaction into action. Remember that a 5% retention could equal a 20% profit increase. This is where the money is at. Before we talk about bringing guests back, let's talk about protecting your reputation. Earlier, Alexa shared some really great tips on guest communications. I highly recommend when you get the slide deck, you go back into those slides and you use those resources we've created for you. Put those into action to help drive better guest experience and better reviews. 92% of travelers are reading reviews before they're booking. Your online reputation is your business model. I've split this down into 4 pillars. The first is your review response strategy. I've got the clock icon here. You want to respond to every review within 24 hours. So 5-star reviews are getting a thank you, 3-star reviews are getting acknowledgement and resolution, and then any 1-star reviews, we're responding professionally to those, we're taking it offline, and we're fixing the problem. Second is that rating protection. This is the shield. You want to address negative feedback proactively. If something went wrong during the stay, don't wait for the review. Reach out immediately, offer a resolution, and turn a potential 1-star into a 5-star recovery story. Third is your social proof building. This is the star. So you want to showcase your best reviews everywhere. You worked hard for those, so you should show them off. Put them on social media, your direct booking sites, your email signatures, your check-in welcome message, everywhere. And a bonus, if you can get user-generated content from your guests, share that too. Ask for testimonials, build your credibility. The fourth is your online presence management. So these are the platforms. Keep your Google My Business updated, optimize your OTAs with fresh photos. If you have a direct booking site, make sure those reviews are front and center. Your reputation is your retention engine. Protect it like your business depends on it, because it does. Let's talk a little bit more about guest communication best practices. This is going to be your tactical playbook for that stage 2 to 3 conversion we talked about at the funnel. At day 1, this is a review goal. So this should happen within 2 hours of checkout, sending a message like, "We hope you enjoyed creating new memories. Thank you for staying with us." This is where you're going to get that 5-star review. This is a very important time because it's your golden window. At 2 hours post checkout, the guest is likely in an Uber or at the airport gate. They're still high on that trip experience. If you wait 24 hours, they're going to be back to reality, back to emails, back to laundry, and all of the magic is gone. Use that 2-hour window to capture the emotion. At week 1, this is a repeat booking goal. Sending a message that's something like, "We noticed you loved the balcony view. Here's 10% off your next stay." You want to convert that interest into commitment. It's really important to include a personalized hook here if you can. Don't just send a generic discount. Mention a specific detail from their stay. Like in the example I shared, I mentioned the view that they loved, but you could also mention a coffee shop they visited or a restaurant that they enjoyed. It's going to prove that you're a bot and not just a host. At month 1, this is a referral goal. So sending a message that's something along the lines of, "Fall is beautiful here. Check out these local events." You want to build your referral engine. International travelers are often only seeing cities during a mega event. So if you use this 1-month touch point to show them what the city looks like when the crowds are gone, sending something like, "Fall is beautiful here," it isn't just a line. That's an invitation to a completely different, quieter experience. And then ongoing, it's a loyalty goal. You want to send quarterly touch points, sending messages like, "It's been a year, come back and see what's new." Build that lifetime value. Every email you send should be passing the "so what" test. If you aren't providing a discount, a local tip, or a memory, don't send it. We want to stay top of mind, not in the spam folder. If you execute this sequence, that's how that 5% retention target will become achievable. Again, the goal with follow-up comms is to stay top of mind without overwhelming. Make sure that each touch point adds value. Let's talk about that second pillar on the conversion funnel, the foundation. So this is those flawless operations that we've been spending a lot of time talking about this entire presentation. If you downloaded the host readiness kit, we included this timeline. And right now we're in April, which is a critical month. The World Cup starts in June and the summer heat is coming. Equipment failures are going to kill retention. So your April action items should be all of your preventative maintenance. Service those AC units, inspect your appliances. Also, any final readiness QA. Test your Wi-Fi, stock the essentials, verify compliance. You need to be guest ready by May 1st. Do not skip your April maintenance. It's going to be the difference between 5-star reviews and lost customers. Okay, my favorite slide, the data slide. So let's talk about the numbers. 30 to 40% of short-term rental guests are repeat customers. This is real industry data. This is happening. And it's 15 to 20 times more expensive to acquire new customers than to retain past ones. Your first booking, you're spending 15 to 25% in platform fees. A repeat guest, there's zero cost to acquire. The goal of your first stay should be to let the platform do the marketing for you. But the goal of your second stay should be to move your guests to your direct booking site. For experienced managers, a 5% retention could equal a 20% profit margin increase. And for new hosts, this is how you're going to build a real business. To stand out and drive that stage 2 to 3 conversion, you have to move from being a bed provider to a destination ambassador. Alexa set us up earlier with some great tips during her presentation around preventable headaches. Let's talk a little bit more about some of that prep work. So I've included some energy optimization tips to get us started. You want to direct your guests to official resources for match schedules, fan festivals, and transit information. These sites are going to auto update, so you don't have to maintain them. If you download those city-specific host readiness kits, we've outlined your city's resources for you. Second, you want to provide the survival essentials. So think about that guest coming in from London. They don't just need Wi-Fi, they need reliable Wi-Fi so that they can stream games and talk to their families back home. Get into the mind of the traveler. Provide those extra trash bins and recycling bins for post-match celebrations. Provide universal adapters, stock coffee, stock laundry detergent, and all the other essentials. It's going to cost you $50 to $100 up front, but it's going to generate 5-star reviews. And last, reduce friction. Offer jet lag friendly options such as early check-in or late checkout for guests that are arriving from overseas. Provide a transit cheat sheet, subway maps, train schedules, rideshare pickup zones. Create a late night food map for when the match ends at 10 p.m. and they're hungry. Most kitchens close at 10 p.m. So if you can provide a list of 2 or 3 spots that serve food until 2 a.m., you could have just saved their night. This is that local legend experience. When you anticipate these friction points of international travel, the jet lag, the language barriers, the transit confusion, the cultural differences, you can create an experience that they just can't get at a Marriott. And here's the key. This is the story they're going to tell. This is what they're going to post on social media. This is what they're going to tell their friends. And this is why they're going to come back. That is how you are going to become a property that World Cup travelers recommend to everyone they know. So these are my key takeaways and 2 priority action items for all of you. Takeaway number 1 is that stage 2 to 3 conversion is your biggest opportunity. Turn satisfied guests into return visitors. Takeaway number 2 is that 5% retention could equal a 20% profit increase. That's the target. Takeaway number 3 is to execute that communications playbook, the day 1, the week 1, the month 1, and the ongoing. Your priority action item number 1 is to complete that April preventative maintenance. You've got 2 weeks, service everything. Priority action number 2 is to launch that day 1 follow-up sequence. test out some different welcome messages, or I'm sorry, different checkout messages to get those 5-star reviews. Remember, you don't want to just host a fan, we're hosting a future regular. That's your mission, and that's how you're going to turn the World Cup into a 10-year revenue stream.
Thanks, Blythe. Oh man, that makes me miss my property management days so much. I love getting my hands in the data. Speaking of, in our kickoff event, I did a segment on sports tourism, and I'll share this just to emphasize everything Blythe just said, and that is that this segment of travelers, sports tourists, have a really high propensity to return to a destination they visited for a sporting event and recommend that destination, even the property they stayed in, the accommodations they stayed in, to others as well. So this is a prime audience to be getting back in multiple times or getting their referrals in. So definitely take advantage of everything Blythe just shared. With that, let me wrap us up here. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us for this event. I know we shared a lot in the chat. We'll share resources after this event. But if you want to get started on a few things today, I would highly recommend these 3 things. One is to download your host readiness kit. We've got free kits for every single city customized to your city on gameon2026.rentresponsibly.org. There are checklists, there are links to more, there are fill in the blank templates. There's all sorts of things that you can use in these kits. So take advantage of them. They're there for you. Stay connected with us on social. Wherever you're hanging out, we're probably hanging out too. And we've got tons of stuff to share there. And like Tracy mentioned in the middle of the event today, join your area alliance. Chances are your state or your city has an association, a coalition, a networking group, some sort of group of short-term rental operators that can be extremely helpful, especially for everything very local to your area. So take advantage of those, join them, subscribe, all of the above. There's a map that we just dropped in the chat where you can go and search your area. And if you don't see one, but you want to start one, reach out to us and we can help you do that. Finally, I have to thank our partners, or I get to thank our partners, Expedia Group, Furbo, Proper Insurance, Avalara, Truvi. These companies are all partners for a reason. They provide incredible value and resources to everybody in this industry. So again, I highly recommend checking out everything they shared today, everything they shared in the kickoff event, everything we've got about them on the Game On website and Rent Responsibly and in our network everywhere. They are just huge assets, whether you're hosting for the first time or even doing this for a few years. So check them out. With that, we will see you guys in the network. We'll see you on social. We'll see you around. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.